The throne room of the Varath sovereignty was designed to make people feel the weight of it before the queen said a word, which was the point of the design, and which the design achieved with the specific success of 4 centuries of use by people who understood what the room was for, and who had, in 4 centuries, made the room into what it was supposed to be, a space in which the distance between the person at the throne and the person on the floor was not only the physical distance, which was considerable, but also the architectural distance, which was the distance that ceilings and light and acoustic properties and reflective floors produced in the people who stood on the floors and looked up. Edric Tal was looking at the ceiling. He had been looking at the ceiling at intervals since the moment he was brought through the formal entrance, which was 5 minutes ago, and the court had noticed this with the collective attention of an assembled court that had seen many people brought through the formal entrance and had not previously seen one who was looking at the ceiling's architectural details. The court had filed this observation in the category of foreign behavior that was probably irrelevant to the proceeding, and had returned its attention to the proceeding's formal stages. Edric had returned to the ceiling. Specifically, he was looking at the weight distribution in the decorative arch that framed the north-facing section of the ceiling's upper register, which had a quality of asymmetry that the south-facing arch did not share, and that was either a deliberate design decision, in which case it was extremely unusual for a room that was otherwise precise in its bilateral symmetry, or it was a structural accommodation, in which case the structural documentation for this room had a finding that the 4 centuries of maintenance records probably did not adequately account for. He made a notation in his memory, the ceiling, the north arch, the asymmetry, and returned his attention to the proceeding, which had reached the stage where the queen was going to speak. The queen's voice, in the room that had been built to carry it, arrived at every corner with the quality of something that had never needed to be raised. The charge was read in the standard formal language of Varath court proceedings, which he had been briefed on in the Contracted Operations Network's standard preparation for operations in Varath-adjacent space. The evidence was summarized, the sentence was delivered, no mercy. He looked at the queen. He looked at the throne room's reflective floor, which had the color of 4 centuries of finality. He looked at the queen again. He laughed. Not the performed kind, not the square-shouldered, chin-up defiance of someone who had decided that dying defiantly was the available dignity. The other kind, the genuine kind. The sound of someone who has heard something that struck them in the honest, involuntary way of genuine responses as actually funny. The throne room was very quiet. The queen said, "Explain." He explained. He explained with the quality of someone who had been carrying a piece of information for 6 months, and who had arrived, finally, at the room that needed to hear it, the room that had the queen's precise attention and the senior technical advisor who was now entering from the side access point at the queen's summons, and who had the bearing of someone who had been working and had been summoned, and who was not yet certain what he had been summoned into. The Herath weapons power regulation system, the thermal coefficient in the tertiary coupling of the secondary feed, the maintenance documentation that the treaty's technical transfer had provided 40 years ago, and that was incorrect in the specific way that an incomplete technical transfer was incorrect, not wrong about everything. Wrong about the specific value that the progressive failure mode depended on, which meant the failure was happening in the expected place at the expected rate and would complete in 12 weeks, possibly 11, given the patrol schedule's recent increase. The senior technical advisor gave the wrong value. Edric gave the right one. The technical advisor said the first value was authoritative. The preceding value was derived from the treaty's technical transfer. The tertiary coupling inspection schedule, Edric said. When was the last one? The change in the technical advisor's expression was the specific change of a professional encountering the pattern that their certainty being wrong would produce. Not dramatic, but visible in the way that walls become visible when the light on them changes. The last inspection date was in the technical advisor's operational memory, and the operational memory was producing the inspection date, alongside the rate of fracturing that the incorrect thermal coefficient would have produced at that date, and the rate of fracturing that the correct thermal coefficient would have produced, and the relationship between those 2 rates and the current timeline. The queen called for the inspection. The proceeding was suspended. The throne room returned to its waiting quality, the quality it had between proceedings, which was the quality of a room that was very good at holding things and had been doing so for 4 centuries. The inspection findings arrived the next morning in the Queen's consultation chamber, which had a lower ceiling than the throne room and a different quality. The quality of a room that was used for working rather than for wait. The senior technical advisor delivered the findings with the bearing of someone who had conducted a professional inspection and was delivering professional results, and who was also, underneath the professional bearing, in the specific discomfort of someone who had been wrong about something important and whose profession required them to deliver the evidence of the being wrong. The findings were stress fracturing in the tertiary coupling consistent with the progressive failure mode, current severity consistent with a 12-week failure timeline, possibly 11 given the operational profile. The Queen read the findings with the precise attention that 19 years of managing a sovereignty had built, reading for what the findings said rather than what she had expected them to say, which was the quality that distinguished precision from confirmation. She called Edric to the consultation chamber. "The complete documentation," she said. "You have access to it." "Yes," he said. "Can you repair the weapon?" She asked it directly. No approach, no softening. The question was the relevant thing. He looked at the table. He looked at the Queen. "I can repair the weapon," he said. "Or I can transfer the complete documentation and provide technical guidance that allows your staff to repair it, which takes longer but produces a technical staff that understands the weapon rather than a weapon that was repaired by an external specialist." He paused. "The second option is better for the sovereignty's long-term capability." She looked at him with the assessment quality that was her primary tool. "You're advising me to choose the option that makes you less necessary." "I'm advising you to choose the option that makes the sovereignty more capable," he said. "The second thing is the relevant one." She was quiet with this in the way of someone receiving advice that was accurate, and that she was assessing for accuracy, rather than managing her response to the person who gave it. "The intelligence-gathering charge," she said. "What were you gathering intelligence on?" He told her about the failure timeline, the contracted operations network's documentation, the 6-month verification operation in restricted Varath space that had confirmed the failure was progressing at the predicted rate. He told her he had not yet decided what to do with the information when he was captured, because that was true, and he had decided now because that was also true. "What did you decide?" she said. "The complete documentation and the technical guidance," he said. "The documentation at no charge. The source that produced it would not benefit from its being withheld from a civilization that needs it. The technical guidance at the standard contracted rate for an engagement of this complexity." She looked at him. "You are negotiating your contracted rate under a suspended sentence of no mercy." "The sentence is suspended," he said. "The rate is standard. Both things are true." The corner of the Queen's expression, not a smile, but the thing that was adjacent to a smile in a face that was precise rather than performed, moved. "The contracted engagement," she said, "will be formalized through the standard administrative channels." "Yes," he said, "with the sentence suspension documented as pending the engagement's completion and the completion's assessment." "Yes," she said. He looked at the consultation chamber's ceiling, which was lower than the throne rooms and which did not have the asymmetry in the north arch. He looked at the Queen. 12 weeks, he said. Possibly 11. The second option takes longer than the first. "The second option is the one you recommended," she said. "Yes," he said. "Then it's the one we'll use," she said. The 11 weeks were the kind of 11 weeks that produced what he had told the Queen the second option produced. Not a fixed weapon, but a technical staff that understood its weapon, which was a different and more durable outcome, and was also a more honest one, because the Varath sovereignty's relationship with the Herath weapon had been built for 40 years on incomplete understanding, and what the 11 weeks produced was the beginning of complete understanding, which was the beginning that was always harder than the continuation, but that the continuation depended on. The senior technical advisor was the most valuable member of the team for the reason that recent wrongness made people valuable. The professional openness that certainty did not permit, and that the throne room's thermal coefficient moment had produced in the advisor with the specific, productive discomfort of someone who had been confident, and had been wrong, and had learned something from the being wrong that was more significant than the lesson of the specific error. Edric worked with the advisor most closely and most productively, not because the advisor was the most technically capable. Another team member had faster processing speed on the documentation. but because the advisor had the quality that made technical work transferable rather than just executable, which was the quality of genuine understanding rather than accurate performance. The tertiary coupling was repaired in the 7th week. The documentation was transferred in the 9th. The independent maintenance review was in the 11th, with him at the observer position rather than the specialist position, which was the position that made the review's outcome belong to the technical staff rather than to him. The review was conducted correctly. He closed his observer's notebook and said, "The technical staff is competent to maintain the weapon independently. The documentation is transferred and indexed. The tertiary coupling will require another inspection in 9 months." The advisor said, "I know the schedule." "I know you do," he said. The Queen called him to the throne room for the final meeting, and the throne room was in the secondary meeting configuration, and he registered the configuration as information about what the meeting was. The ceiling was the same ceiling. He had been noting its details for 11 weeks and had this morning noticed a third one, the weight distribution in the North Arch, which was doing something that the South Arch was not, which was not decorative. "The engagement is complete," she said. "Yes," he said. She told him the sentence's status, converted from suspended to resolved without penalty, on the basis of the engagement and the outcome, under the court's legal provisions for intelligence gathering subsequently demonstrated to have served the civilization's interests. She said it in the formal language, which meant she had prepared it, which meant she had made the decision before the meeting, which was the quality of precision. He received it with the quality of someone who had expected the situation to eventually produce this, and who was not performing anything about the receiving. "The laughter," she said, "in the proceeding. You were about to execute the only person who could prevent a weapon's failure that would have significantly altered the outer system's strategic balance," he said. "The specific irony of the timing is genuinely funny. I didn't mean it as a performance." "I know," she said. "That's why I said explain." He looked at her, she looked at him. The room held them in the quality that rooms had when the significant thing happening in them was not the kind of significant thing the room was built for, which was a different quality from the designed quality, and which the room had also, in 4 centuries, become capable of. "The second option," she said, "the documentation transfer and the technical guidance, you stated the reason." "Yes," he said, "and the reason you didn't state." He looked at the ceiling, he looked at the table. He looked at the Queen of the Varath sovereignty, who had been precise about what situations required for 19 years, and whose precision had produced, in 11 weeks, a technical staff that understood its weapon, a sentence resolved without penalty, and a secondary meeting configuration where the ceiling was interesting and the questions were direct. "The engagement would take 11 weeks, he said, "long enough to determine whether the situation was what I thought it was." "And is it?" "Yes," he said, "it is." She looked at him with the quality of precision at the level of someone who had made a decision and was in the moment of it. "The Varath sovereignty's technical infrastructure," she said. 11 years of accumulated maintenance documentation produced from the incomplete technical transfer. It needs to be reviewed and corrected against the complete version. The review requires someone who knows both versions and can identify the specific points of divergence. He looked at her. "That's a significant body of documentation." 11 years of it, she said. "The contracted rate is the standard specialist rate for a documentation review engagement of this scope and duration," she said, with the specific quality of someone who had determined the terms and was delivering them. "Which I expect you will confirm is the rate you would have proposed." He looked at her for a moment. "It is," he said. "The duration," she said, 18 months conservatively." He looked at the ceiling, the North Arch, the asymmetry, the weight distribution that was doing something the South Arch wasn't. He looked at the Queen. "The secondary meeting configuration," he said, "for the working sessions." "The secondary configuration is for working sessions," she said. "The preceding configuration is for proceedings." "And this meeting is not a proceeding," she said. He opened his tablet. He typed the engagement record scope field with the thoroughness of someone who wanted the documentation to be navigable by people who came to it later. He added to the notation column, "Note: secondary meeting configuration for working sessions. Queen's precision is the primary asset for this engagement. The ceiling has 3 architectural details worth documenting. Begin review." "The ceiling," he said. "The third detail I noticed this morning. The weight distribution in the North Arch. It's not decorative." She looked at the North Arch. She had been looking at this ceiling for 19 years in this room and had not noticed the north arch's asymmetry, which was the specific finding that an external assessment produced, and an internal familiarity did not. No, she said, it isn't. Is it in the structural documentation? The maintenance records go back 4 centuries, she said. Not all of them have been adequately indexed. He looked at the North Arch, he looked at the Queen. That's going to need to be addressed, he said. Yes, she said, it is. Outside, the Varath sovereignty conducted its patient, efficient business. The Herath weapon was operational. The technical staff understood it. The documentation was complete and indexed. The sentence was resolved without penalty in the court's formal record. The 18-month documentation review was in the contracted operations network with the standard rate and the conservative timeline. Inside the throne room's secondary meeting configuration, 2 people were looking at the North Arch, which was doing something the South Arch wasn't, which had not been noticed in 4 centuries of proceedings in this room, because proceedings were not the kind of activity that produced careful attention to ceiling asymmetries, which was the specific finding that external assessment produced. The engagement had begun. He was thorough about it. The North Arch, in the light that the secondary meeting configuration's positioning produced, had a quality at its junction with the ceiling's main span that the South Arch's junction did not have. He noted it, he opened the notation column. He would be here 18 months, conservatively. The documentation was going to be thorough. The review was going to be accurate. The North Arch was going to be assessed. And the Queen, who had been precise about what situations required for 19 years, and who was being precise about what this one required, was looking at the North Arch with the same quality of attention that she had brought to every significant finding in 19 years of sovereignty, reading for what it actually was rather than what the 4 centuries had assumed it was. Which was, he was finding, a very good quality to work alongside. He was thorough about finding this. He found it accurate.